Hey folks, and welcome to another top audiophile album video here on Passion for Sound. Today we're taking a look at what you, the community, have suggested as the best electronic albums in terms of sound quality. So just as a reminder, or if you haven't seen these videos before, I'm not listening to them in terms of pure enjoyment, although that's a factor. It's also a question of how good do they sound? Are these albums options for you to go to if you're testing out your system and wanting to hear the very best that it can deliver from a sound quality point of view? And so with that context out of the way, let's jump in and start talking about your recommendations of the very best sounding electronic albums. We're going to start off here with the Tron Legacy album. This is actually a soundtrack album from the newer version of the Tron film. I'm going to mark that one off so I know I've done it. And so this has been recommended by Neil in PDX. I think, is that Portland? I'm not sure. And he's saying, turn it up loud, wait for the bass to come thundering in. Now, I've actually listened to some of the tracks from this album before, so I do know it quite well. I'm just going to see if we've got a version on Cobas, hopefully. Why do I not have a version on Cobas? Because I don't really want MQA. Here we go. Let's get in here. Got it. I'm just going to jump through this quickly. I've actually done this video before and I had to throw all of the footage in the bin. I can't remember what the issue was, but it all went horribly wrong. So I actually have listened to this before. I'm going to only listen very briefly and just refresh my memory on these as to what I thought about each one, and then I'll share some thoughts. Now, as you'd expect here, this is a brilliantly put together album. It was a collaboration with Daft Punk, and the sound quality is fantastic. The recording quality is fantastic. It's one of those albums that I wouldn't put on to listen to, but I can definitely see why some might use it as a test album. The challenge that I probably have with tracks or albums like this is that they don't always give you a lot to take in terms of reference points. You don't really know what's meant to sound like it's coming from where, how much depth there should be. This is more of a frequency response type test, more so than a spatial imaging, focusing, accuracy type test. And that's okay, there's nothing wrong with that. It's an album that, as I said, is beautifully put together, being electronic, everything crisp and clean. It's got a nice sense of impulse and energy to it. So you're definitely going to be able to tell if your system's got the ability to do the energy, do the impulse and the attack and the thump and the punch that it should. Bass depth is huge. It's a good solid album from a test point of view. As I said before, not one that I'd generally put on and listen to, but certainly if you're looking to see just what your system's capable of in terms of frequency response and energy, this could be a really good choice. So good suggestion. Let's take a look at the next one. Next up, we've got 3D Reworks 001 by Max Cooper. This one's been recommended by Chad, so thank you, Chad. So excited about this one. He's recommended it twice by the look of it. That's great. And it's a binaural recording, which is unusual for electronic music. I'm going to be really interested to hear how this one goes, or hear it again, because I have actually heard all these before, as I said before. I keep having glitches with recording on this particular video. I don't know what's going on. This one's just cursed. So if I say something that doesn't make sense, it's because I recorded it before, but the recording didn't work. And so I think I've said it, but you haven't heard it. So sorry about that. But yeah, I've had a couple of issues and I've had to throw away some of the recordings. I've had recordings stop halfway through. It's been a bit of a mess. So looking now for 3D Reworks 001. And this is it here. Let's go and see if we can find a Cobas version once again. There it is, and we'll take a listen. It's only a short album, binaural, which means headphones only. You can listen on speakers, but it's going to be best on headphones. Let's give it a go. One of the cool things about electronic recordings or electronic albums is that they're generally going to sound fantastic on pretty much everything. And that's good and bad. It's good in the sense that you can always get a system sounding great with them. It's not so good because even on a poorer system, electronic albums can sound excellent. They do things with the way the music's put together. Because you've got no reference point on how it should sound, everything kind of sounds good. And so I think it is something to be aware of, and it's going to apply to every single album we're going to talk about in this video, is that it's going to play some tricks sometimes where you think something's amazing, and then you go and you put something more acoustic on there, and suddenly you hear some of the shortcomings because our ears know how it should sound. Having said that, this album is brilliant. As I said just before we came into it, it is a binaural recording, or a binaural, I don't know if you call it a recording if it's not actually being recorded so much as produced, but it's binaural, meaning that it's designed specifically for headphones, and therefore when you put on headphones, you get an amazing sense of space within the soundstage. The soundstage really wraps right around your head, and you can hear the placement of each individual sound just perfectly, so that's great. Once again, just like with Tron, It's very clean, it's very defined, you get a great sense of impulse and energy and attack. So again, from a technicalities and a frequency response point of view, it's excellent. I don't know that it's going to give you a lot of information about the imaging capabilities of your system because once again, it's going to make everything kind of sound good. And that's great if you just want to nerd out and hear how great music can sound through a pair of earphones or headphones. If you're looking at it as a comparison tool though, I guess it's going to show you the differences between a poorer set and a better set of headphones or earphones. But as I said, it's going to make even the cheaper ones, the more basic ones, the not so good ones, they're still going to sound great. So keep that in mind. Great recommendation. Really fun listen. If you haven't tried this out before, go check it out on your headphones or earphones. It's really, really cool. Speaking of, I should cover off why I'm using headphones here. I've done a few of these videos now. I've done a classical music one. We did a jazz one, and I'm forgetting one as well. I can't think what it was, but anyway, I've done a few of these, and soundtracks was the other one. And the thing that I've found doing these with both speakers and headphones is that it doesn't really matter whether I use headphones or speakers. The headphones obviously can't throw a soundstage that's the same as speakers, but everything I hear through headphones translates really effectively to speakers. So if I hear a better stage on the pair of headphones that I'm using, I'm going to hear a better stage from the speakers. So I don't want people to sit here and see me wearing headphones and think this is not transferable to speakers. It absolutely is. And in some cases, the headphones actually give me more insight because I'm not having to deal with the room. I'm not having to deal with the perfect placement if I move a bit to the side. I'm getting more perfect sound from the headphones in some ways than I am from speakers. So everything I say here does translate, except if it's a binaural, and my screen's there by the way, except if it's a binaural recording, that's going to obviously really be only for headphones. It can be listened to on speakers, but not as effectively. So that's why I'm using headphones. While we're talking about the source chain, I should let you know that I'm running everything from Roon, as you can see on the screen. It's going via the Chord M scaler. It's coming out of my PC via a JCAT USB card, a tubulars consensus USB cable into the M scaler, out of the M scaler and into the Chord Dave, which is being connected up with a set of Analysis Plus, I think they're called Silver Apex BNC cables. And then from the Dave, I've got Curious RCA cables up to the Enlium AMP23R. That's being powered by a Tellurium Q Black version 2 power cable. And then running from the Enlium AMP23R into the Mesa Elite using the silver-plated upgrade cable from Mesa, and running today, I've just put on the hybrid pads because they're a bit bassier. I thought it might be fun for the electronic albums. I do generally use these with the angled Alcantara pads for now, but I just thought today it'd be fun to mix it up. So that's what I'm listening with. And with all that said, let's now talk about the next album recommendation in the list. And that's going to be Biosphere by Substrata. So it's quite bleak apparently. So this sounds like it's quite an ambient one. This might take me a bit more time to get into. I've forgotten most of these since the time I first tried to record this album, so I'll go back and revisit this one. And this was suggested by Michael Ellis. So thanks, Michael. Let's take a listen to, what was it called? Biosphere by Substrata. Let's have a look. For some reason, my camera is only going to record 5 minutes at a time, which is driving me nuts. I'm using this camera instead of my webcam because some people didn't like the webcam footage last time. I thought I'd try something new. Let me know in the comments what you think about the footage of the this camera compared to my normal webcam. And actually, I might even switch to the webcam in a second because this is going to drive me crazy if the camera keeps cutting out. So I'm just trying to look up and see if I can find Substrata on Cobas. That's not an alternative version one, and I don't know if it just cut off before I got a chance to say before, but if this is not the version that you're talking about, Michael, then please let us know in the comments. For now though, I'm gonna have to go with the alternative versions and we're gonna see what we hear. So I definitely agree, and I've switched cameras by the way now to save this issue, so do let me know if you prefer the other camera. This one's obviously got quite high, but it's just easier because it doesn't keep cutting out. This album's really nice. I definitely agree with Michael's suggestion that it's a very ambient album. It's kind of a little bit bleak. You get lost in it a bit. I don't know if this is the correct version as I spoke about before, but it's got a nice clean sound to it. Because there's not too much going on, you can really kind of focus in on the details. What's nice from a testing point of view, this one's actually got some vocals through it. In one of the earlier tracks, it might have even been the first track, Poa Alpina, perhaps Alpina, I'm not sure. But in that particular track, I think there was some acoustic instruments as well, and I do like that when you start to get acoustic instruments mixed in with the electronic. You get more of a reference for tonality because our ears know what it should sound like. So I do like that. This is not an album, again, I would probably put on to really listen to, but from a just understanding your system capabilities, it can be quite interesting. As I said, there's lots of information popping out from different places, but with enough space to really understand what's going on. It's also one that, from an ambient point of view, just to put on in the background and have this interesting sonic landscape around you is quite enjoyable too. So another nice recommendation. Thanks, Michael, for that one. Let's take a look at the next one. We've got Def Center Owl Splinters. So it's tense and ambient, using field recordings. That can be fun. So they're capturing sounds from the environment, a little bit like Yoshi Horikawa, who might be making an appearance later, I think. Can be a bit overwhelming and a bit busy. Let's have a listen and see what we hear. So this is from Menno Hookendorn. Thank you, Menno. I'm going to jump in straight away on this one halfway through my listening. I'm only up to track 2. This is another one of those examples where you've got some acoustic instruments mixed in with the electronic, and I love it. On Time Spent, there's a piano. It's a really interestingly recorded piano in the sense that you can hear the hammers hitting the strings, so you get the percussiveness, you get the resonance of the piano. Really, really nice. It's a very kind of ambient album so far. It's not one, again, that I would sit down and listen to from a musical point of view in terms of just, focusing in for the journey, but it's one of those that to put on in the background and just have that sense of ambience and that sense of mood that it might create. That's where I could see it being really good and very nicely recorded. One of the things I do like about this album is that if you wanted to hear how well your system images, this one's kind of good because there's ambient sounds. It's not just instruments that we don't really know where they should be, how they should be. And obviously, this is a made up auditory landscape. But one of the things I like is on some of these tracks, it's going to give you an idea of how big and spacious the soundstage is from your speakers. Because there are very clearly placed individual sounds, so ambient, those field recording sounds that we talked about before, those are very clearly placed in space, and therefore you're going to get a good sense of how your speakers, your headphones, your earphones are performing in terms of creating space and separation within the soundstage and overall soundstage size and scale. So really good for that. It's quite a dark album. It's not an uplifting album, so take that into account. If you're looking for good music that's going to make you feel good, this one might not be it. But if you're looking for good music in terms of well-crafted sonic journeys, this could be right up your alley if that's what you're looking for. So check that one out in the playlist down below in the description. I've got links through to Tidal and Cobas for those albums that are available on both, of course. So check those out down in the description below and take a listen for yourself and see what you think. Moving on now, though, so thanks again, Menno. This one, I don't even have to listen to this one again. Decks and Drums and Rock and Roll by Propellerheads is absolutely nuts. It's such a good album. I'd forgotten about it, so thanks, Martin, for recommending it again to me. This whole album is a winner. It's such an exciting, fun album, both musically, but also, let me just bring it up here, Decks and Drums. Or is it just Decks, Drums and Rock and Roll? Am I misspelling it? Maybe I'll just do Propellerheads. I used to use this album years and years ago when I was doing car audio design. Here it is. The quality of the mixing, the mastering, the recording, everything about this one is fantastic. You've got some really cool sort of spatial sounds. So there's a number of microphones is one example of that. Echo and bounce is brilliant for that. You've got bass, you've got crisp treble, lots of detail. Sound stages are amazing. You've got vocals from Shirley Bassey and History Repeating. I could rave about this album all day long. I'm not going to actually spend any time talking about it. I'm just going to say go listen to it. Check out Decks and Drums and Rock and Roll from Propellerheads. It's an absolutely brilliant listen. As you can see here, I've got multiple tracks that I've hearted within my personal collection. I just love this album. So again, Martin, thanks so much for recommending this one. Incredible album. There is one, by the way, that's got a skateboard going left to right. I can't think which one it is. Let me quickly find out. Yeah, nailed it. It's Oh Yeah. So you put this one on a pair of speakers or headphones, whatever you want to do. There's somebody riding a half pipe with a skateboard going from left to right, back up and down. Wonderful little imaging. It's one of those tricky ones that's going to sound good on everything, but it's kind of fun to listen to. So yeah, check out this album. Whole album's incredible. Good listening as well as great recording and mixing and mastering. So we're going to move on from that one pretty fast. Next one, Equinoxe by Jean-Michel Jarre. So this one's an interesting one. Jean-Michel Jarre is very much a pioneer of electronic music in many ways. Incredible sound quality as well. I don't know that this is my favourite album of his in terms of both from a listening point of view, but also from a testing point of view. So Jules from the UK has said that part 4 and the beginning of part 8 are his favourites. Let's just jump straight to those because some of the albums very kind of ambient once again, and I don't tend to enjoy those albums as much from a listening and or testing point of view. But let's jump to part 4 and see what Jules is recommending here. I can definitely, so let me go back to the album art. I can definitely see why Jules recommended this one, part 4 that is. Part 4 is actually one of the tracks from this album that I really enjoy as well. I think from memory I was first introduced to Jean-Michel Jarre on either a compilation album or I don't know. Anyway, however it was, Equinoxe Part 4 is one of the tracks that stuck with me as well. Where the Jean-Michel Jarre stuff is fantastic is that it's so clean and crisp. You're going to get the full range of frequencies. You're going to get lots and lots of detail, texture, a lot of spatial information, although it's often kind of swirling and whirling sound. So I don't know that it's going to tell you a lot about what your system's capable of in terms of natural and effective image placement, but as a musical journey and hearing your system kind of stretch to its limits in terms of spatial cues, frequency response, energy, articulation, and attack, it's absolutely brilliant there. So good recommendation. As I said, overall for the album is not one that I tend to go for from a listening point of view, but Equinoxe Part 4 in particular is both a good listen and a good test for those things that electronic music is good for, like frequency response and articulation and energy. So nice recommendation. Let's have a look at the next one, which is Greater States, an EP by Double Touch and Regan, I'm guessing that said. And this is from Fabrizio. Thanks Fabrizio for the recommendation. And you're saying the third track, Lost Desert Remix, has a vocal that surrounds you. Let's have a listen to that. So Greatest Day by Double Touch. There it is. Straight away, there's a really nice, impactful bass there that's going to give you a good sense of impulse response. With your system's tight and punchy, it should sound very tight and punchy, not particularly deep, but a good sense of energy there. And the same is true for the high frequency percussion. It should have a really nice sense of energy. This is a really interesting one for me. I get why it's been suggested. It's definitely fun to listen to. There's lots going on. There are some really nice kind of ambient sounds spaced around the soundstage that's going to work quite well for that kind of information. A bit like the, I can't think of the name of it now, our Splinters, I think it was before, from Def Center. It's got a little bit of that going on, which is nice. Where I don't think it's actually so good as a test album in terms of showing you stuff about your system is that the vocals got so much reverb to create that sort of sense of it sort of flowing around you a little bit that it does make it unnatural from a is my system accurate point of view. So take that into account. It's a great sounding album, or say album EP. This mix in particular is very nice. I did listen to the rest of the album as well. It's all very nicely put together. But just like some of the other albums and tracks that we've talked about so far, I don't know that it's giving you a good reference point so much as just making every system sound great. It's going to sound good on pretty much everything. And so that's where I don't know that it's a good test album so much as just an interesting and fun listening experience. Great music for sure and enjoyable, but maybe just not a good test. Not for everything anyway. Let's move on now to Guy by Jada G. And yeah, I agree. Roscoe's recommended this one and said it's sort of blending the line between electronic and pop, and having listened to it before in my failed version of this recording, I do agree with that one. But let's jump over to it. Guy by Jada G. This reminds me of something I meant to say on the last track as well, and that is that, and it happens here as well as the previous track, often with these sampled percussive lines, you'll sometimes find that they actually get a little bit too hot in the treble for whatever reason. I don't know if it's the way it's been mixed, the sort of setups that the people producing electronic music tend to have. I don't know if it's the fact that it's sampled and it gets a little bit of harshness because of that, but both this track and the previous track, even on a fairly mellow set of headphones like the Elites, it's a little bit bitey in the treble for me, and that means that from a testing point of view, it could trick you into thinking that a system is too bright, or it could trick you into choosing components and a source chain that's too mellow, because if you're using this as a reference, you're going to want to tame the treble, and I don't think that's actually accurate. Knowing how my particular source chain should sound, it's never sounding like this on an acoustically well-recorded, or I should say, a well-recorded acoustic set of instruments. So do be aware of that when you're using this electronic music. Samples can be very misleading because of the way they're captured, reproduced, mixed, etc. Back onto this one specifically, I don't know that I'd use this one for a test. It's good sounding music. It reminds me a bit of kind of if Sade was a bit more high energy and brought into the 2000s and the 2020s. It's got a little bit of that feel to it. Nice, smooth vocal with a bit of soul to the vocal, some electronic backing music. Very enjoyable, but I don't know that it's showing you a huge amount about the system because, again, it's doing that electronic trick of making everything sound good, but it's going to therefore make everything sound good. You're not going to hear the difference between a great system and a not so great system as much with this track. The vocals are a little bit kind of big and spread out in the soundstage rather than having a tight focus. And again, this comes back to what I've said a few times. When you've got a recording of acoustic instruments, it tends to, not always, but it tends to lead to a more realistically crafted soundstage. The moment we go into the world of electronic music, all those rules go out the window because the instruments never existed in space, and therefore you don't have the spatial cues that they were recorded with, and also the engineers can create whatever sense of space they want, and they actually need to, by adding reverb, timing delays, all that sort of stuff. So good album from a listening point of view, probably not one that I would personally use for testing. As with all of these, if you disagree, if you've got a different idea, if you think it's good for something in particular, let us know in the comments down below. And again, I'm talking about this mostly from a testing and system understanding point of view, not musical enjoyment. All these so far have actually been really enjoyable. All right, we've got another Jean-Michel Jarre here, which is Oxymore. Okay, so this is actually the older one. Yeah, this is, I think from memory, this one was done before Equinoxe. This was recommended by Harpo, so thanks Harpo for the recommendation. And I agree, from listening to this before, it is more of a musical journey. It's almost like listening to a soundtrack that takes you along for the ride. But let's bring it up and refresh my memory. Oh, it's got a binaural headphone mix. Interesting. For the sake of this, because I know a lot of you are going to be using speakers, I'm going to stick to the non-binaural version. As I said before, everything I'm going to hear here is therefore going to translate effectively to speakers. All right, first of all, I got it wrong before. This is actually a recent release. This is a 2022 release. I don't know where I got it in my head that it was an older one. It is, as you'd expect from Jean-Michel Jarre, extremely crisp and clean sounding without getting harsh like I spoke about on the previous couple of albums. Very, very clean, very, very crisp. It's not an album that I find particularly musically enjoyable. There's not a lot of melody to it. It's more a collection of sounds. It's more rhythmic, so it has got rhythm to it. It's not completely just, soundscape in terms of noises only, but it's more rhythmic than melodic, and I miss the melody in it. That's just me personally. It also means that because it's more rhythmic and because it's going to just throw a lot of different sounds in space at you, again, you don't have a lot of reference as to how it should sound. And again, it's going to make pretty much everything sound pretty good. So I think for frequency response, impulse response and energy, image placement, or not image placement so much as image focus, each sound should have a precise place in space. All of that it's going to be really good for. I probably wouldn't use it for a lot else though. It's one of those that it's more a case where I appreciate the level of engineering quality, sound engineering quality that's gone into making it sound fantastic, but not so much that it's revealing anything about the system that it's being played back on. That's just my take on it. So I'm going to move fairly quickly past this one. It's definitely worth a listen, definitely very interesting, but not one that I would use as a test. Next up, we've got Marion Hill Unusual. So electronic and R&B, recommending the song differently. This is Marchin recommending this. Because I have recorded this before, I'm tending to jump. Oh, I remember this album. This was amazing when I first listened to it. I loved this one. Let me jump back and refresh my memory. This album, and I've been through the whole album before, so I haven't gone very deep into it on this particular playthrough. This is an absolute cracker of an album. Both musically, it's really interesting, but it's also great in terms of the recording. You've got a wonderfully recorded vocal. You've got really crisp, clean sounds, lots of depth in the bass and impulse and energy and attack. Just absolutely fantastic. From memory, it reminded me, let me just quickly listen to it a little bit more. It reminds me a little bit of Billie Eilish, but a bit less pop version of Billie Eilish, and I'm a huge fan of hers as well. The sound here, it's got that kind of mellow vocal, slightly laid back sounding vocal, but with a really nice sense of musical landscape going on around it, telling a story, taking you on a journey. It's got melody, it's got rhythm, just it's magic. I'm going to stop making up words and just say, check this one out. Go to the playlist and absolutely have a listen to Unusual by Marion Hill. This one's going straight into my, what I call my discovery playlist, to spend some more time with it and probably add it to one or more of the Patreon playlists. So I've got different tiers of playlists by genre, by the sort of thing that it tests, and then also I've got some specific ones for top tier patrons where I sit down and listen to the whole thing and make notes from beginning to end on what they should listen for. This one might go to that VIP tier for patrons because it's absolutely fantastic. So I'm not going to spend any more time on that one. Go check it out for yourself. It's absolutely a brilliant recommendation. So thank you, Marchen, for that recommendation. I'm skipping past Melody Gardot's Sunset in Blue. That probably should have gone into the jazz one. I don't see that being in any way electronic, so we're going to move past that. Not saying it's not a great album, just I'm focusing on electronic here. And that brings us now to Mono Lake Silence. I'm not sure which is the name of the band and which one is the album name. We'll see that in a second. And apparently we've got excellent imaging and soundstage with great sonic textures. Godason has recommended this one. Have I said that wrong? Let me know in the comments. Sorry if I butchered it. So let's go have a look at Mono Lake Silence. This one's got some great examples of what I would call frequency response testing. So you've got this track Far Red's got a really deep punchy bass in it. That's going to show you if your system can't reproduce this one, you know it's struggling down low in the bass. So it's going to be good for that sort of stuff. That's about probably all though. The soundstage cues that it gives you aren't really referenced to anything in particular, and so it's hard to know what's kind of correct or incorrect, how it should be placed, where it should be placed. It's one of those albums that's probably going to sound good on almost every system. And then on top of that, and this is just my preference coming in, it's not a particularly melodic album. And I think that was even said in the... Yeah, so it's sonic textures is a good way to put it. This is an album of sonic landscapes more so than melody and taking you on a journey, musically speaking. It'll take you on a journey from an ambience point of view, but not so much from a melodic point of view. So it's not one I would probably use very much, if at all. I think there's other test albums out there that do a better job of more, not a better job, but a better job in the sense of doing more things at the same time. So you can listen to one track and you can understand frequency response capabilities, that impulse and energy. You can understand the tonal accuracy if it's got some acoustic instruments or some vocals in it. I think there's others that do more of that better. This is an interesting listen, and if you're into the ambient soundscape type stuff, do check this one out, but it's not one that I would use personally for testing. So going to move on fairly fast so we don't drag this video out and jump onto Multitude by Stromae. So electronic music with colours from various instruments adding depth, which is going to be great because it gives us something to kind of latch onto tonally. Let's have a listen. And this was, I've got no idea how to pronounce your name. Is it Partu? I'm guessing. Let me know in the comments. I seem to be saying that a lot today. Multitude by Stromae. What's funny here is that I've forgotten all these albums by name, but when I see them, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember listening to that before when I first did this recording. I don't know what's going on with this particular album video, but everything keeps crashing on this one. So I don't know if you just lost a little bit of the recording. I don't know if halfway through what I was saying and doing, you've just lost me. Apologies if you have. Let's see if we can keep going and see if this works. So where I was up to was we're about to find Multitude by Stromae. And I was just saying that the fun thing about this is because I've done this whole thing before when it crashed the first time, I keep having to come across these albums where I've listened to them before, I've forgotten which one's which, and this was another one that really stood out to me as a great, great album, despite the weird cover art that does my head in that one for some reason. But yeah, really, really cool album. and I'm just going to have a quick listen to refresh my memory as to why I liked it so much, because I remember liking it. I don't remember why. Let's take a quick listen and I will remind myself. This one's really interesting. It's a great album from my point of view. It's enjoyable. It's interesting. I don't speak French well enough to be able to follow along with the lyrics, but it's still very enjoyable. And it's a really interesting album because it's a combination between rap or hip hop with acoustic instruments and electronic beats. So it sort of fits in the electronic category. I'm certainly not going to say it shouldn't be in here, but it also blends different genres, and I do enjoy it for that. The reason it's such a great album, in my opinion, is it's very cleanly put together. So everything sounds crisp and clean, but not artificially enhanced in any way. You've got a vocal, although vocal being a rap vocal, it doesn't give you a lot of sense of space in terms of where they are in terms of the microphone, the soundstage, etc. But you've got the tonal accuracy of a vocal. You can hear if your system's got both the upper mid-range texture of a vocal as well as the resonance and depth. It's a male vocal, so it should have some body to it. It's really enjoyable from that point of view. From memory, there might have also been some other styles too. Give me 2 seconds. Yeah, so there's also some singing in this one as well. So you get rap, you get singing, you get choir, like multiple voices at least. It could be the same person dubbed multiple times. But you get the range of different vocal styles. The National Orchestra of Belgium was a part of it, so you get these wonderful orchestral moments within amongst electronic sound. It's just a really enjoyable album that's also a fantastic recording. So another one, along with the Marion Hill album, another one that I definitely recommend going and checking out for yourself with the links down below in the description. So now let's go back to our list and see what's next. We've got Outer Edges, Noisier, and that was recommended by Martin. So we've got layers upon layers of details and textures. Okay, so looking at this one from a detail retrieval point of view, let's have a look. Outer Edges by Noisier. Okay, I remember the album cover, quite unique, but I can't remember what I thought of it, so I'm going to have a quick listen and remind myself. So this one's it's more of a sort of a drum and bassy feel, this one. Still electronic. I'm not saying it's not electronic, but it's got a drum and bass type feel. I don't particularly enjoy this music from a listening point of view. It doesn't make it bad, or, it's not saying people shouldn't have recommended it, but I do find it less. It's not to say that people shouldn't have recommended it. It's just that it's not one that I would choose to use as a test track because I don't particularly enjoy it. And part of the reason for that is also probably the reason why it's been recommended, and that is there's a lot of texture in the sound. So you've got all sorts of percussive elements that are quite complex. So each sound, each instrument has its own texture applied to it, and that can actually make it both a bit harder to listen to, but also could show you detail retrieval. The problem is we don't necessarily know what it should sound like. So unless you've heard it on a system that you know is highly resolving, you don't really know what it should sound like on your particular system. And then if your system is highly resolving, what's the limit at which it's doing it right versus not correctly? One of the tricks you can also have with a track on an album like this is that it can almost over-enhance your sense of what it should be doing from a detail retrieval point of view. The sound is quite harsh and quite aggressive, so again it could lead you to want to pull back a little bit on the frequency response of your system or the sense of attack from your system. And then when you go and put on something that's a bit more kind of normal in terms of an acoustic recording, it might actually end up sounding a little bit sort of smoothed off or rolled off if you've tuned a system based on something like this. That's not to say you shouldn't use this. It's just something to be aware of as you're putting it all together. So it's an interesting album. It's not one that I particularly enjoyed. I can understand why it's being suggested for detail retrieval, but I would probably actually choose something with acoustic instruments that are very textural. You can have some great recordings of drums where you can hear the nuance of the drum skins. You can have recordings of stringed instruments where you can hear details of the actual string texture. Violins being played where you can hear the bow biting against the string. There's lots of other things that I would personally choose first, but I totally get why this was suggested. So thank you for the suggestion, Martin. Next one, we've got Silent Shout by The Knife. Let's have a look at that one. And it's an ethereal experience. Let's see. Silent Shout by The Knife. What do I recall of this one when I see the album art? I remember the album cover. I don't remember what I thought of it. This is one of those albums that fits into the category of having a lot of stuff going on that's going to make some systems, or probably all systems, sound energetic and interesting and exciting, but it's probably going to trick you a little bit on lower end systems by making it sound energetic and exciting. I'm not saying it's a bad album, I'm not saying it's not one you should use for testing, but I think there's better options in this list. One of the things I really would struggle with as a recommendation of this one for testing is that the vocals and some of the textures in the upper end of the percussive stuff can get quite harsh, quite aggressive, and a bit grainy. And so again, it's one of those that if you were to use this as a reference, it's going to lead you to tune your system dark. It's going to make you tune your system to be smoother and more rolled off, unless you like the aggressive and kind of grainy nature of the sound. And so I don't think I would actually use this one for a test. The bass is probably the one area you've got a nice kind of impulse, punchy, impactful bass. But I think there's better options out there, like the Marion Hill album, that I would choose before this one. So interesting album, interesting sound. It's quite different to a lot of the others in this mix. Worth checking out if you're just generally looking for some interesting electronic music, but I don't think I'd use this one as a test album. So thank you, Glenn, for the recommendation. Let's move on to the next one. This is the Orb from UFO. Visceral bass stereo imaging, recommended by Nicholas or Nephilim81, who I have seen on YouTube. Thank you for the suggestion. So the Orb UFO. From memory, this was an old recording, or at least has old style album art. I can't remember. UFO, the Orb. I also recall it not coming up with that search the first time. Let's go to UFO. There it is. I'm sorry to say this is one that I wouldn't really recommend for anything other than musical enjoyment, of course. It's fine for that if you enjoy it. But from a testing point of view, I don't think it's a really good album to use. It's got quite a low-res feel to it. It doesn't have any sort of sense of crispness and articulation to the sounds. It's not bad by any stretch, but it's really not going to reveal what a great system's capable of. The bass is okay, as was suggested in the notes for the suggestion. The bass is okay, but I don't think it's as good as some of the others on the list. So I would skip past this one from a testing point of view. I don't think it's really got any standout features for testing compared to what else there is and how good it can be. From a listening point of view, it's decent music to listen to. It's enjoyable. It's got a little bit of melody, a little bit of rhythm. I enjoy it from that point of view, but not one I would go to for testing personally. So I'm going to move on and look at Toy by Yellow, and I actually don't have to listen to this one because I already know it. This was recommended by Shane, an Aussie audiophile. Definitely good engineering. The reason I'm not going to spend too long on it, I will bring up the album art so we can see it. The reason I'm not going to spend any time looking at this one is I think there's actually a better album from Yellow that I would recommend. Anything from Yellow is going to be beautifully engineered, as Shane said. They do incredible work. Boris Blank, I think his name is, has also gone on to do kind of solo albums, if you like, where he's done partnerships with Malia. And I think Malia actually even features on Toy. My internet's really slow here today for some reason. The reason I'm saying that I think a different album is better, and I think it's Hello or a name like that. I'll find out in a second once my internet comes back. The recording on Toy is good, and the music is good, but I do think, let's go to Yellow themselves. I personally think it's Touch was the one I was thinking of. I think Touch is actually better than Toy. That's just my personal preference. I think both are solid. There is some really crisp, clean stuff on Touch. Ultimately, you can't go too far wrong. As I said before, anything from Yellow is going to be brilliant. They do a great job of doing crisp, clean, punchy sound. I'm just more impressed whenever I listen to Touch by Yellow. I think it's even better. Let me do a quick listen though again. I might be a bit biased here by the fact that I probably prefer the music more on Touch. I also think the mixing is a little bit too crisp on the top end on some of this album. One of the things that Yellow always do really well is give you really crisp, well-defined sound. So each sound has its own character, and so it makes this amazing landscape of different sounds that all come together beautifully. On the toy album, I feel like some of the top end is just a little bit sharp, a little bit aggressive at times, compared to something like Touch, where I feel like it's better balanced. That's just me, my preferences, my source chains, etc. But yeah, I lean a little bit towards Touch as a better overall test album, but anything from Yellow is going to be brilliant. So Shane, thanks for putting Yellow in the list. It's definitely a worthy recommendation. Here's another one where I've got a recommendation of an artist that I know really well, but also one where I would personally choose a different album. So the recommendation is Vapor by Yoshi Horikawa, and anything from Yoshi Horikawa is absolutely brilliant. So Orwin, thank you for the recommendation, and again, like I said to Shane, thanks for bringing Yoshi Horikawa into this mix. If we go to Vapor, and then I'll tell you the one that I prefer. This again could be my own bias in terms of the albums that I prefer from a musical point of view. But if we go to Vapor here, the way Yoshi Horikawa's music's put together is it's a lot of field recordings that are then mixed together into a kind of a sonic landscape along with a melodic journey as well, which is why I like it. It's not just sounds. He makes music out of the sounds, which I love. So having listened a little bit more, this is my own bias coming into play here. I really enjoy, when I can get back to his page, I really enjoy Spaces. Is probably my preference for a Yoshi Horikawa album. It's not to say it's better. I think both are great. To me, Spaces has a little bit, funnily enough, more space within the sound. So the Vapor album's quite busy. Each track has a lot going on, whereas I feel like he was maybe a little bit more even-handed, a little bit more deft in putting it together with Spaces, and so I do slightly prefer Spaces overall. Having said that, anything from Yoshi Horikawa, just like anything from Yellow, is going to be excellent. Great recordings, wonderful sense of space and positioning of sounds, good frequency range. You've got the bass that's often electronically generated. A lot of the high frequencies are being created by those real recordings of actual things, sounds, instruments, etc. So really, really good because you get a sense of naturality. You're going to kind of know how some of these things are meant to sound, and then you're going to add on top of that the fact that the full range of frequencies is there for you to work out where everything should sit, how it should sound, etc. So really enjoyable album. Again, anything from Yoshi Horikawa was great. Now we've got a couple of late additions here that I haven't tried before. The first one being Depeche Mode 101 from Kai. All right, let's take a listen. Depeche Mode 101. So this is a proper reaction now. I have not heard this before. Not as a, thinking about it as a test album anyway. Okay, so this is a live album, which can always be fun. Not something you think of necessarily for electronic being live. Actually, no, let me change the versions over to Cobras. I think this one's going to be good for those wanting that sort of soundstage experience. It's definitely a nice recording to give you a sense of the space you're in. In this case, it's the Rose Bowl. It's a big auditorium, or not an auditorium so much as a big stadium, I think. I don't know that it's going to be particularly good for overall resolution and frequency response of your system. I don't think it's going to stretch the system there at all, but definitely if you want to create that sense of, or understand the sense of your system's ability to produce soundstage cues, so the information you need to understand where you are in space as a listener, where the musicians are in space, where the crowd is, all of that is excellent from this recording. You get a lot of that sense of ambience from this one, so it's good for that, but it's probably a fairly targeted one in that sense that I don't think I would use it for anything beyond that soundstage information, and therefore it's probably more one of those that's a great album to get lost in if you enjoy the type of music and you want to feel like you're there at the performance. That's where I think this one's probably really strong, more so than maybe a really good audiophile reference album. Let's go now to Tomorrow's Harvest by Boards of Canada. So we've got lots of layers of sounds, textures, and samples that will test the resolving power of your system, and this is from John. Let's find out. Tomorrow's Harvest, Boards of Canada. For some reason, I always think there should be Birds of Canada and that it's a typo. I don't know why. That's just me. Oh, hooray. It took me straight to Cobras for once. Let's have a listen. This is quite an ambient album once again, and with that comes the fact that I don't tend to listen to albums like this from a musical enjoyment point of view. That's neither here nor there, I'm just sharing. However, what I would say is it's not probably one I would go to as a test album, and the reason for that is that whilst there is a lot of texture and detail, as I've spoken about on some of the other albums like this one, if they're not real sounds, we've got no reference point for how much detail or texture we're used to hearing. If you think about great recordings of acoustic instruments, sometimes the excitement there is in hearing textures you haven't heard before, or you don't expect to hear from those instruments. Because this is all electronic, I don't know what to expect to hear, and therefore when I hear it, I'm like, okay, that's how it sounds. That's the electronic sound they generated. It doesn't really tell me if my system is more or less resolving. That's not to say it can't be fun and enjoyable to listen to. It's just that I have no reference point to know whether this system is actually resolving everything in the recording, if it's resolving more than other systems might record or resolve. It doesn't give me a lot of reference points. So nice album, nice ambient journey to sort of sit and lose yourself in or put on in the background to create a sense of ambience while you're doing something else perhaps. Definitely nicely put together, beautifully recorded. But again, it's one of those that it's not anchored in anything I can use as a reference point and therefore hard to use as a test album, as is so much electronic genre. So I hope no one takes any of my comments here as a knock on their choice of albums. It's just stuff that I personally couldn't use as a test point. And so the last album we've got Then Again by Mitch Murder from Rocket Launcher with Infinite Ammo. So thanks, Mark, for the recommendation. All right, let's have a listen. This album's got some serious 80s vibes to it. I don't know if it was produced in the 80s. Let's have a look. There you go, 79. Very, very clean recording, almost too clean. And what I mean by that is it's one of those albums, and this happens in multiple genres. I've had some suggestions from patrons that are more metal type genre, and it's some recordings and some productions can make everything sound good. It's almost like they're too clean, they're too energetic. And this is borderline on that. I don't think it's quite there. I've stopped on the track Frost because it really caught my attention because of the range of bass and the higher frequencies. It's not too busy. You can really hear some detail here. This one is one I would definitely use potentially as a test. There's also some real instrumentation in here, which is nice. So you've got a guitar in there at times, and it gives you some reference points to understand what's going on. So having listened to more of this album now, it's a little bit like if Jean-Michel met up with... I'm not sure who I'd put it to. It's got that Jean-Michel Jarre electronic music sound, and it's got that 80s pop sensibility, and I can't think of who it would be. So there's no vocals, it's all instrumental. It reminds me a little bit Louis Shelton as a guitarist comes to mind. That sort of jazz pop sort of feel from the 80s. It's an enjoyable album. It's not one that I would probably listen to from a musical point of view. It's got a little bit too much of that 80s vibe for my personal tastes. But having said that, it's very clean, nicely recorded. I completely agree with Mark's comments. He talked about over here in his recommendation about how well the sounds have been sort of layered together and carefully put together. I definitely agree. So the craftsmanship that's gone into this, the engineering, the placement of sounds, the coherency it's produced is fantastic. From a test point of view, I can definitely understand it being used. As is the case with most of these albums, it's probably one I wouldn't personally use because there's a limited number of reference points. There is some real instrumentation, guitars, bass guitar in Twilight Marina, it seems. It could be programmed and synthesized. It's hard to know. But the point is it's not quite as clean a reference as... So I'm just checking to see if my camera had just crashed. My recording had just crashed again, but it's okay. It's not quite as clean of a reference point as a couple of the standouts here, which for me would be the Marina Hill album. And also, and I'm going to go back and quickly highlight these in case you're forgetting like I am which ones they were. For me, the real standouts here was the Marion Hill Unusual album is the absolute top of the top for me. The was it that one? Yes. Multitude by Stromae was way up there as well. And I think anything from Yellow. Those are probably the standouts for me. Yosa Horikawa coming in really tightly behind those. Those are the standouts for me as albums and tracks I would use as a specific test. The rest of them have things they do that I think are good. They've got elements that you could use for testing in most cases. But I think for many of them, There's reasons I wouldn't choose them as tests, so much as just knowing they're great recordings of good music, if it's music that you enjoy, of course. So I'm going to tie this one up here. Check out the albums for yourself from the playlists down below in the description. Let me know which ones you really enjoy. If you think I've missed something, or not me because I didn't choose these, if you think the community missed something, put it in the comments down below. I'm not going to respond to any of the comments down below with recommendations and trying them out again. We'll probably circle around and do another version of this in the future. By the way, I'll be putting up, if I haven't already, putting up a survey for the next track or album review. We've got Funk and Soul coming up next, and then I haven't worked out, I think Folk is what I'm doing after that. So keep an eye out for a survey on the community tab. If you go to the Passion for Sound YouTube page and the community tab, the surveys go in there so you can get your recommendations into a list like this one. And so for now, I'm going to say happy listening. Go and enjoy these albums. Let us know in the comments your thoughts on them and any others you think should be in this list. But for now, let me leave you with the music. So as I said, happy listening, be kind to each other, and I'll see you here next time on Passion for Sound.